Welcome everyone to the Financial Affairs Committee meeting of March 2020. Let's begin with a roll call and then approval of minutes, but I'll read off of my screen in the order of my screen. Jennifer Lohman.
Here.
Charles Burdell Williams.
Present.
Leah Mulhern.
Here.
David Cohen.
Present.
Joel Fishbein.
Here.
Zachary Epps.
Present.
Pamela Henry.
Present.
Julie Haywood.
Present.
And I'm here as well, Dan Schultz. The next item on the agenda is approval of previous month's minutes. Can I have a motion? The February minutes specifically. Thank you, Mr. Fishbein.
Second, Leah Mulhern.
Second, Ms. Mulhern. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. All right, our next order of actual informational business is a review of the 2021-2022 budget. Mr. Linderman. And then I won't interrupt. There are several agenda items in your presentation.
Okay. There we go. Let's get through. Yeah, we have a bunch of agenda items, and we'll try and be as quick as possible here tonight. If I might just answer the one question about purchases that was brought up in the facilities. Policy 610 does detail who has the authority to authorize purchases. Mainly, it's the position that I'm interimly holding in accordance with whatever's budgeted and in accordance with what the state guidelines are. There's also a section of that policy that deals with purchases that are subject to bid and purchases that are and contracts and what level the superintendent can approve and then bring to the board later. So just I know, Mr. Schultz, you mentioned the policy regarding policy 619, but the policy 610 right ahead of it deals with the purchasing. Let's talk a little bit about the budget. So here's the budget as it stands at the end of February, and that was just yesterday. So these numbers, we look to be in pretty good shape as far as our local revenues. We're 99% done collecting our local revenues, as most of them are real estate taxes. We do have some various and sundry other revenues that come in during the year. The state revenues are seemingly on track. We should exceed the budget a little bit there. That was because we did not budget what the governor said last year. It did not come in what the governor originally said last year. It did come in a little higher than we budgeted, but it'll be about $400,000 higher, I believe, that when we're all said and done. We will run through our first series of projections next month. Federal numbers. Those numbers will go. We will probably exceed that too as we start to collect some more of the ESRA funds, particularly the balance of the ESRA 2, as we start collecting some of the ESRA 3 fundings. Now, as you said, we're going to talk a little bit about the audit. Particularly, we're going to talk about two things, the two major things that were discussed by the auditors last month, and that's being the fund balance, and we're going to review the factors that led to the fund balance being pretty good, and then we'll also review the food service, which had a $130,000 loss, and we'll try and get through that. So we're going to look at these one at a time. Let's deal with the fund balance. So you had an $8.3 million addition to your fund balance, and that in itself is pretty good. It actually brings you back closer to where you should be as far as your fund balance. You were, as you know, you were talking about this before I came. Your structural deficit was leading to a kind of erosion of the fund balance, and through some of your work and through some of the unfortunateness of the COVID, we were able to recoup most of that last year. So the factors leading to that would be let's talk about the revenues. Local revenues, you were up about 2.6 million over what your budget was. Most of that was the increase or the funds received from the collection of the local district initiated tax appeals. A lot of those had been hanging for many years. So about 2.1 million of that 2.6 is directly related to the success we had with local district initiated tax appeals. About 500,000 was an increase in your delinquent tax collection. So your Portnoy people actually collected about 500,000 more than what was budgeted, and about 500,000 more than what was collected in the prior year. So that's the local revenues. State revenues, you were actually short about 700,000. You actually had budgeted a number that we did not make last year, and there was some reductions in Social Security and PSERS is the pension reimbursement. A lot of that has to do with something I'll talk about in a second with expenditures. As you reduce your salary cost, you're going to reduce your reimbursements for things like Social Security and pension, because the state, that is a reimbursement that is a cost reimbursement. So you spend the money, they give you the money they owe you. Federal revenues were about 1.1 million over what you budgeted, and there's no surprise that is primarily to do with your ESRA funds, collection of the original ESRA 1 funds and some of the ESRA 2 funds and some of the other assorted small COVID related grants that you had in the 2021 school year. And then I'm going to talk about a couple things in expenditures, the major things in expenditures. Your transportation budget, you had negotiated a payment to your transportation contractor, and most schools did, to keep the transportation contractors afloat during COVID. You paid 60% of their cost, even when they weren't running. So that resulted, because you only paid 60% of what we budgeted, it resulted in about a $2.6 million that you were under your actual budget as compared to the year before and your budget. This year, you eliminated the class program from 21-22. It was taken out of the budget, but in 2021, you did not run it. It's because of the fact that you weren't running school most of the year. And so you were 900,000 under budget in that particular category. It would have been more, but you continued to employ the administration component of it through the year. And so that cost you a couple $100,000 to do that. And then salaries, and I preface this, not class related, were about 2.1 million under budget. So these are assorted and other salaries, mainly to do with a lot of your hourly people and certain aides and certain salary categories that were not being paid during the COVID year and the year you had. So that's really what led to your fund balance being so different. I will tell you that, and I do not have it as a part of the report. I will share it with the board. We did, Lou and I had a rating review with Standard & Poor's as a result of last month's approval of the parameters resolution to refinance and refund some of that money. And one of the positive comments they had was they were very happy to see that the fund balance was getting back to where it should be, and they did encourage that it stay at that level. So I will get that to you kind of shortly after this. And by the way, our rating stayed the same. We tried to get it increased a little bit, but I do believe that if we continue to keep our fund balance at the level it should be, you may actually be able to increase a half a step. You're still AA negative, And it's not out of the question that possibly the next time you go to get a rating that it couldn't be increased to just a pure AA. Let's talk about the food service loss. You had $130,000 in losses for 2021. Lou and our consultant and I met with our food service people to talk about some things that that probably led to the some of the reason that we did not make up the money. Probably the number one reason is we did not participate in the summer feeding program until 2021, which was last summer. That was a program that was started in the beginning of, if you got into it in 2020, right after COVID started, they actually started paying you a substantial amount more money, upwards of $1 a meal for all meals, not just the summer. So you did not do that, and it did not factor through for the entire school year. You lost that reimbursement for the year. Now, subsequently for 21-22, you have that, and we are actually on course for actually a pretty good year this year with the profit and loss. One of the things we found in reviewing their statements is you're paying for a proprietary software that the vendor has. Not sure why, and our consultant highlighted this, and I'm familiar. We use a software system through the state called Primero Edge, and it comes with the state stuff. And included in that state software is a financial software that most school districts use. So we're actually going to correct this in the RFP with whoever gets the bid and require that they use the state software. If they want to use their proprietary software, that's fine. But that was a $10,000 cost that you could have diverted or could have alleviated had that not been included. Your food service director worked all year, even though you didn't work a lot. So that cost you some money. We did not have a breakfast grab and go option last year. That's another thing that really would have increased our ability to have the feds reimburse us at a higher level. And most schools offered 7-day-a-week feeding. So when you were handing out the food to students during COVID, you gave them the equivalent of 7 breakfasts and 7 lunches. We were only doing 10. Or 5, I'm sorry, 5. I'm not sure why that was a decision made. But again, these are things we uncovered. You do have a guarantee in your contract that if you get past a certain level, and you did exceed that level this year, that the contractor is supposed to pay you, but the guarantee was invalidated once you missed 10 days of school last year. Now, that's one thing. Another thing is we probably should have negotiated something with them. Unfortunately, the sign off on the guarantee happened after I left in the middle of June and before I came back in September. So nothing I could do about that. We did not use a lot of our free commodities. They did require that a lot of them weren't grab and go kind of option commodities, but they are free, and we did have people working, and we could have used them, which may have lowered some of the costs, but we did not use that. And we didn't apply for a supply chain grant in December of 2020. Do not know. I have no indication on why. It was not a big type grant. Would have been somewhere in the $10,000-$15,000 range. We are applying for the one that is due the middle of March. So hopefully we will get that. So those things, they all kind of factor into what led to the food service loss. As I say, a couple of the things we are going to kind of prioritize as we look to evaluate the RFPs this year. We are doing summer feeding. We are requiring a breakfast option for all the schools next year, and we will make sure that the guarantee, if it's missed again, it is at least negotiated. This was a very odd year, and we probably just shouldn't have given up that guarantee as quick as we did, without a little bit of negotiations with the current vendor. So,
Mr. Linderman, would it make sense to pause
Yeah.
for questions for
That I was going to suggest that because I don't want to get too far past that. People to do that, I will unshare, or I will, let me unshare this so it's for.
Get that to the Brady Bunch view. While that's happening, if there's any board questions, please feel free to raise your hand. And after that, I will go to the public. Ms. Henry.
So one of the questions I have is I thought we did pay for, or not pay, but I thought we did provide lunch or food during the summer of 2020.
We were not participating in what was called the SSO program through the school lunch program. So we did not qualify to have any of those things reimbursed at the levels that we should have. Again, so
Mr. Linderman, I did, because I had the same thought as Ms. Henry. I found the presentation from August 2020's Financial Affairs, and it does reference the SSO program, saying that we participated in it. And I want.
You did not, because I had to sign us up for it when I came back in
All right.
when I first came here in it was somewhere between January and March. We started that for the summer of 21. Then
That fair enough. There was a lot of transition going on at that period of time, so that's unfortunate to hear. But thank you, Ms. Henry. Was that your question? Thank you, Mr. Burdell Williams.
Yep. Thank you for the first part of the presentation. Just a comment around the breakfast option. I know that a few years ago we did have like a pilot, talking about the potential for including breakfast in future RFPs. And I think at the time it was decided that we weren't going to move forward with that. I, for one board member, am supportive of breakfast for all of our students, and the fact that we had to go through this arduous process to get there, maybe not as excited, but the point is I'm excited for the community because I do think there are benefits to having the program available. That's all.
And just a commentary, and thank you. I'm very supportive of breakfast too. You don't go into breakfast to make money on breakfast, but you can adjust your work hours so that it doesn't cost you money to serve breakfast. You have to have people in there early to start prepping for lunch. Most breakfasts are what they call grab and go. So it can be almost prepped the afternoon before, put away, and then just pulled out when people come in. When your first staff comes in the morning, you only need about 10, 15 minutes before the first student comes through to have the line open and ready. Then the rest of the staff is coming in after that person's doing it. It works. And what happens was if you include breakfast, if you include all these, actually when you include breakfast, you actually increase your lunch reimbursement too. So there's a lot of incentives that are factored in there. But if you look straight on it as well, we're only making X amount of dollars off of breakfast and I have X amount of hours allocated. Well, that doesn't work, but you have to look at the big picture and it will work. So yeah, I'm a big breakfast person too.
Got it.
And that's why I'm not 155 pounds anymore. We just can't serve my favorite breakfast, which is scrapple. So,
we get what we can get. Thank you, Mr. Burdell Williams. Was that your?
That was all. Thank you.
Thank you both, Mr. Cohen.
Yes, thank you. Going back to the 21-22 budget, a chance I missed, just had a slight internet glitch for a few seconds there. But under purchase property services, if you could address why we're spending over budget at this point of the year, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check on that and get back to you again. I did notice that, and shame on me for not checking that and seeing what the difference is. Let me get you guys an answer to that tomorrow.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen, and thank you, Mr. Linderman. Any other board questions? Seeing none, I will just mention regarding the school breakfast program, I'm also very excited about it. I want to make sure that administration's aware of the pilot program that we participated in a few years ago, which we ended with results that weren't great in that it wasn't utilized as much as we were hoping it would be. And I only raised that because maybe there are lessons learned from that program in maybe the way it was rolled out or communicated, so that way we can make sure that what we put in place going forward is better utilized. So not sure if that's in a document repository somewhere, but thought I'd pass the institutional memory on. That is it. If there's any members of the public with comments or questions, please feel free to raise your hand at this point, and you will be promoted to being able to speak. In the meantime, I see Ms. Haywood.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Schultz. Just as a reminder, I think that presentation was through Educational Affairs by Dr. Smith. The month I don't recall, but I do remember was through Educational Affairs, where she gave a summary of the pilot program. So,
Thank you, Ms. Haywood.
Yeah.
All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised by members of the public, so I think we can move to the next agenda item, which of course I've lost track of. So but we'll find out soon.
I'm back on it. Should be back up here.
Ah, yes, thank you.
Oh, there we go. So next is the preliminary budget. Not much has changed. We are really kind of drilling down on this month. So next month we hope to have you, not only projections for year end this year, but also some better detail on your expenditures as we get closer to the preliminary budget adoption. So right now you are within the Act 1 range, so we believe you're good to go on that, and I believe you're looking at a number that's higher than you're going to actually settle in at. Why am I thinking? Wanted to talk a little bit about the state budget a little. We did have some discussion on it last month. The state budget did put some rather big and really nice looking numbers in there. However, what I will remind everybody is that number one, this is a budget that it's the governor's last budget, so he's trying to go out with a bang. There's a lot of money put into education, which is a great thing, but the problem with the money that's put into education is they're using a tremendously large, for lack of a better term, I'll call it fund balance. They call it their surplus. They had a $2.6 billion surplus last year, and with this year's projection, they're projecting over $6 billion. The problem with what the governor's budget proposes, and I did not put numbers in for transportation, Social Security, retirement, because they are pendant on some things that on what our actual budget will reflect. But the problem with the governor's budget is that if all the numbers were given as he projected, it would be great for 1 year, but there is no sustainability. It's actually not a structurally balanced budget. It's using a lot of fund balance or a lot of the reserves, and it's not sustainable past a year or possibly two, depending on how much money they end up with this next year. So what we're proposing in the budget, even though the governor's proposal has a budget that is actually almost 2 million more than what we budgeted this year. And what we budgeted this year was actually just a tiny bit more than what we were told the budget for this year, or a tiny bit less than what we were told the budget for this year. What we actually are getting in the budget is what you're seeing for 21-22 is what you see in the 22-23 column. And then the special ed, we are budgeting what they are actually going to give us in special ed this year versus what we actually budgeted for 21-22. So we have some small increases. I will note that this year's transportation budget may fall slightly short of the actual budget because as they factor in reimbursements are based on expenditures and they are always a year behind. So we're going to have a little bit of a downfall in transportation because of that. But the other thing that the governor was looking to do is some things for charter schools, and that would be really good for us. But again, charter school reform has been proposed ever since charter schools started, because when they originally developed the funding formulas for charter schools, nobody really took a look at it. They did it without asking anybody who might be affected how it would work. And I was there when it happened. I was actually involved as in the leadership of PASBO at the time. And again, nobody asked the business managers in the state, like, well, how's this going to work for you if we do this? One of the things that really, if it has a chance, is this statewide cyber charter tuition rate, which would help you guys tremendously because it would go to a $9,800 tuition rate for the cyber charter schools, which would help you save some money. Now, the other thing they're talking about is changing the special ed reimbursement rate for charter schools to go to a more categorical reimbursement rate, the category 1, 2, and now they have, well, they're calling it 3 and 4 now. It was called 3A and 3B. And they're wanting to do that. Now, the only problem with the proposal for the special ed component of that is there's no check and balance. And again, I think I've said this in the past, the charter schools, when they get a student, the first thing they are normally doing if they are not identified as special ed is they are trying their hardest to get them identified as special ed, even if it just means the student is identified to have a speech or language therapist come in, once a week or twice a week for almost no money, and we end up paying $27,000 extra a year for that, which something that might cost $1,500 to $2,000 in a year. So the general word from the people in the know in Harrisburg is that they don't think this plan of the governor's will go. Will something go in between what we got this year and what we're getting, what we're proposed in the governor's? Probably. They do have to use some of that surplus money, but we'll see. So right now, our recommendation is the more conservative approach to the budgeting in the state level will help you, as it did for this year. Again, if you look at this year's budget that we have, the 21-22 budget versus the 22-23 budget, the 22-23 budget is actually what we're going to get for 21-22. So we do have a little bit of a cushion this year between special ed and basic ed as far as what we budget. As I said, about $400,000, give or take, in there. Charter school tuition, and again, this chart, you saw this chart before. I added a 22-23 budget on it. Now that 22-23 budget is really just using the number of students we have now, about 153, and adjusting to the new tuition rate. Now that's based on the current way they calculate tuition. So unfortunately with that, it's looking like a 13% increase. So instead of 3.2 million, you're at 3.6 million. And then this again is just a chart that kind of reviews the Act 1 index for you since it started in 2006, 2007. Lou and I were at a meeting about a week ago where the people from the state came down to talk about the governor's budget and the likelihood, and we went over this. One of the things that it kind of a pet peeve with me is in 2006, 2007, when the Act 1 index was put into place, you were given property tax relief through gaming funds, and you get gaming funds or is the money meant to offset your tax bill to help reduce the tax bill, and that was the state's version of property tax relief. Well, back in 2006, 2007, you were given an amount to put toward your property taxes to reduce your property taxes before we mail them out. And ironically, that amount is almost the same in 22-23 as it was in 2006-07. And my question, and I'm the old curmudgeon that goes to these meetings, is why isn't anybody mentioning the fact that there's casinos everywhere now, but yet schools are getting the exact same amount of money in property tax relief? The only reason they allowed the gaming in was to allow property tax relief. We're getting the same amount of money in property tax relief as we were, 16, 17 years ago. Yet there's a gazillion, every time you turn around, there's another casino. But the issue is they have a flat amount of money they're given to schools for property tax relief, and any extra money keeps going to other projects. So unfortunately, I've been around too long, so I remember things. So budget calendar, again, we'll have next month. We've got to really spend some time. Hopefully we'll clear everything but budget for next month, and we'll deal with that. Now, a couple other things on the calendar or on the thing is I was contacted by the Cheltenham Trans people about a potential extension of the current contract. Currently, it expires June 30th, 2023. Now, the current contract you have is actually pretty sweet for you guys. You had in 2018 and 2018-19 and 2019-20, you had 3% increases to the contract. 2020-21 and a little bit of 2019-20. You had COVID where you hardly had to pay them anything. 21-22, you had a 3% increase, and then 22-23, next year's increase for transportation is 0 per their contract right now. Just on some numbers was given by the Cheltenham Trans people, their labor costs have gone up 28.3%, their equipment costs have gone up 18.5%, their maintenance costs have gone up, and insurance. And the only reason we're not talking about fuel prices going up is because we actually provide the fuel for them. We buy it for them through the joint purchasing bid with the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. Now, what they're looking for in an extension is they're looking for an adjustment in year 1, and there's nobody standing up right now, is there? Because they're looking for a 20% increase in year 1 to try and bring themselves back to normalcy. And then 3% in the years after that. Couple things to keep in mind. They've been with you for, I understand, about 10 years.
If I may pause you for a second and just ask a question, or since this is related to a contract that may be negotiated and has not been agreed upon, would this make sense as an executive session, or?
It could be if you want. I mean, I just want to get it out on the table here, because here's the issue. If you're almost too late to do an RFP for the next year. You're not, but you're almost too late, and you could get stuck with nobody bidding it. Again, with the supply chain things. But yeah, we could punt this to somewhere else.
Yes, agreed.
Okay, thank you. Then why don't we do that?
Okay.
Not that we won't talk about the numbers once they're finalized, but since it might be related to negotiation. Thank you.
Good. Okay, so Lou and I are finalizing the audit RFP. It is going out this month. So we will do an audit RFP as we talked about before. If you remember, our auditors broke up with us back in October. I begged them to get back together. We got back together, but I don't know that we're going to be married. So we have to do another engagement, another audit for the future. So we're looking at an RFP, which will be 3 years, and you'll have the option for 2 additional years. We have a list of 6 or 7 auditing firms, including the current one. They could, I actually think based on the last audit, it was much smoother and much quicker and very smooth. Lou's department did a great job. Maybe they'll reconsider and want to not lose us. So anyway, our hope is to send it out in the next couple of weeks and review it. We will probably do, Lou and I, and we'll probably do interviews with them, and then we will bring it back to the board for May. Then a couple things. This is the first thing is authorization to bid. This is a routine agenda item every year. And I know I've been around too long. I put this on the agenda last year for you to approve. So there it is. And then there's a tax exoneration for Cheltenham Township for the piece of property that was acquired by a developer with the former Ashbourne Country Club, which a developer bought in May of 2019. We discussed this at the liaison meeting a little bit. They bought it in 2019. Right after the sale, there was an agreement, and they subdivided some of the land off, 35.744 acres, and donated it to the township. Now, what happened was, by the time that got all done, our tax bills go out in July. So all of a sudden there's a tax obligation for that subdivided land of about $42,000. The township didn't pay it. They did apply for an exemption and they were granted it, but the town or the county does not retroact exemptions. They do it on a day forward. So we are recommending that you do an exoneration on this property of taxes. The township never paid it, so we're not refunding. We are just kind of wiping it off the books, and we would tell Portnoy to take it off the books. And there are no additional costs involved to it, where we would talked about that. So that's on there. I'd sent a more detailed thing out to the liaison group this morning. So I know the liaison people would have gotten that in my email. So and then that's it. So I'm good.
Thank you very much. I see one hand already raised, but we will first go to questions on the board, and Mr. Cohen.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. A brief response about a little brief history lesson about the gaming revenue. And part of the problem is that about $230 million goes to the horse racing industry every year in Pennsylvania from gaming revenue. And that was basically memorialized and strengthened by Act 42 of 2017. And Governor Wolf last year did propose moving most of that money back towards education, again, for last year, 2021, and got no place. So that's where a big chunk of your money is going, which is, to get on a soapbox briefly, to an industry which is largely dying, where it benefits very few people in Pennsylvania. It's largely out of state. And that's where a big portion, or a meaningful portion, of the casino slot machine money is going to, versus to education. Off the soapbox. Thank you.
I didn't mean to be on my soapbox about it, but I was. And only because I drove to Harrisburg twice this week and drove past that new Hollywood casino there at Morgantown. And I'm thinking, that parking lot was full, and I'm thinking, you're not getting any more money. My tax, everybody's property taxes get a reduction, with the homestead exemption. And we're not even getting another $1 reduction because another thing. That's just, okay. All right. And Mr. Cohen, I'll have to share that.
Thank you. Thank you both. Mr. Epps.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Linderman, thanks as well for the presentation. Around the proposed budget for next year and the essentially the 22-23 governor's proposed is somewhere around 7.1 million. And then what is budgeted is somewhere around 5.4 million. Could you just share how you got to 5.4 from the 7.1?
Well, 5.4 is what we're getting this year. And
For
2021, 22. We budgeted the 2021 allocation in 21, 22. And when they gave the original governor's budget last year, we kept the budget at the 2021 budget level. It was actually scheduled to go up much higher than that. It didn't. It did go up. It went up. The basic subsidy was up like almost $270,000 or whatever it is. So we're only budgeting that. Historically, usually what happens is schools, unless you're a Chester, Upland, or a Reading, or a York, or something, schools historically get a very small increase in their basic subsidy year to year, no matter what the governor does. It's usually in the 2 to 3% range. So I wouldn't be budgeting too much more than that. I mean, we could go up a little bit in that, but I don't know that I would go to the 7.1 million because, again, I think there's going to be some battles. Although the last time the governor was on his way out, the last thing, they actually had a budget done in May, and that would be a miracle. They didn't have the governor's budget done till your budget had to be approved and done. They think they're getting it done early when they get it done June 30th. And every school district, 99% of the school district's budgets are done at the beginning of June. And nobody can use the numbers unless they're just hoping and praying that they are going to get them. So we keep ours conservative. You always will catch up to it. Next year, you'll catch up to it. If it comes through, it's good. Yeah,
no, all of that was some of the context. So I appreciate you even making that explicit. So what I heard you, and essentially it's based on a 2 or 3% increase based upon the previous year. Thanks.
Thank you. And if I could just clarify for myself as well, specifically the 5.4 currently budgeted is actually it's the actual final budget of last year, whereas last year's budget was the previous year's actual, because it's just generally prudent to assume that you're getting exactly what you got last year, and then you can be happy when it comes in a little bit higher. Is that correct, Mr. Linderman?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, and again, if you were a Chester or Reading or even a Coach,
sure,
you would be probably trying to budget a little more because you know they're going to try and give those schools some extra money. They are in deep.
Okay. Appreciate.
But 95% of the other schools across the state have just got to know, well, we're going to only positively get what we got last year and probably a couple percent more.
My very specific question though is, we are not even baking in that couple percent more in the number that's here. We may get more than the 5.42. This 5.42 is actually just the current year's, what we know we will get.
Yes,
we might get more than that, but 5 point. Okay, thank you. All right, that makes sense. I see no other questions from the board. I will. I have one comment, but before I make it, I'll just remind attendees, if you have a question, we are about to go to you, so please feel free to raise your hand at any point. My first question / comment is, the budget that we're looking at, I can tell, we all know the timeline. We have several months between now and when we have to pass the budget, which will be in June. And so we will, though, I guess that the 3.5 or $3.3 million increase is a large increase. And I wanted to say that now, so that way when we get down to the brass tacks, over the coming months. It's not like a shock that hopefully, at least from my perspective, we can get that number significantly lower. I know there's a lot of work that goes into that, a lot of hard decisions that goes into that. And I'm not trying to start a conversation now. I'm just giving the foreshadowing that.
Right, and I'll just remind everybody that 2.3 million of that 3.3 million is benefits.
Right.
That's almost a hard number.
Yep. Understood. The other question I had was around, I actually may have forgotten, and that's fine because I can follow up separately. I just knew I should have written it down. But I'll just end with my comment that I'm glad that we are not going to pursue collecting taxes from the township. That always feels like a strange revolving doors situation, and I'm glad we're not engaging in it. So thank you for that decision. Ms. Haywood, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Linderman. I really appreciate that we're back in terms of fund balance to where we really need to be. And I, as one board member, would like us to retain that level as we've been depleting the fund balance, I should say borrowing against the fund balance over the last several years. And as we look at our budget for this year, I would really hope that we don't have to use any of our fund balance to make up the gap.
Thank you for that comment, Ms. Haywood. And I agree as one board member. I see that we have Mr. Schmidt has raised his hand, so I don't know if I'm able to elevate him to being able to speak.
Mr. Kaufman will take care of that for you.
Thank you.
He's already,
he's
he's there, Dan. Yeah.
Yep. Mr. Schmidt, you are on. There you go.
Yeah, I on this tax exoneration, and it's just more of a comment or a question is, do these developers and landowners just give land to the township so they don't have to pay taxes? Is that how it works? Because I saw that down on that Church Road, that project that's being discussed now too, that they gave the land to the township because obviously they can't build on it, so they don't want to pay taxes. Is that the trick that these people play?
I see Mr. Cohen has his hand raised. So Dr. Scriven, if it's okay, I would pass it to Mr. Cohen.
Yeah, that's fine. I might learn something on this one myself.
I'm looking forward to it as well. Mr. Cohen, please.
So that might be a reason as to why. So with Ashburn Country Club and the land that was in question tonight, that land, for all intents and purposes, cannot be developed because it was near the creek and there are riparian issues that prevent development, and even more so steep slopes than the township by zoning, again, prevent development. So that land there was largely land that cannot be developed. And that might have been a reason why, but also that will lead to an extension of Toogoony Creek Parkway and some recreation land that will be open to the community. For the 222 Church Road development, that land, as Mr. Schmidt also alluded to, is land that very likely cannot be developed because, again, it's near the creek as well. So it might be a reason why the developer in that case is trying to, or has offered to give one of the parcels for that subdivision that's pending to the township as well. In actuality, we know what the tax value is of the land for Ashburn Country Club because that was talked about tonight. So there is somewhat of a loss to the school district and also to the township, but the loss is relatively small in that even though every dollar matters, the land couldn't be developed and the land is just raw land, doesn't have a lot of value. So again, to answer your question, that probably was a reasoning why with Ashburn Country Club, and it probably is a reasoning why from my perspective with the 222 Church Road development, but there are also, in fairness, environmental benefits for having it in the township in terms of maintaining it as open space, but also there are some costs with the township in terms of maintaining it, in terms of eventually having to make sure the property gets maintained, the trees fall down to some degree, and or if other things happen on that property. So it's a long answer. And so it might be a reason why. Do I know that, or does the township know that definitively? I don't think so. But again, logically, that might be a reasoning as to why in both the Ashburn Country Club case and also the 222 Church Road case, parts of the land were offered to the township. And obviously they accepted in the case of Ashburn Country Club. For 222 Church Road, that's still pending to my knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Schmidt, does that, or Mr. Fishbein, your hand is up. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. It's the developer not paying tax on the small parcel that the developer can't develop. And the township then owning it is not a loss to tax revenues, because I mean it's just land that was never going to get developed and now it's back in the township's hands for public use. It's not a ploy by a rapacious developer to get out of paying taxes, because the rest of the parcels are taxed. So yeah.
I'm sorry, but in all fairness, for the parcel, for example, that we spoke about tonight, Ashburn Country Club, that parcel does have a value, even though it's relatively small and it can't be developed. So there is value placed on the assessed valuation of that land as land, and therefore taxes would have been owed by a developer if it had been by the developer versus having it been transferred to the township, albeit relatively small.
Yes. Okay. We're in agreement. I just wanted to add that caveat so that.
Mr. Fishbein, you're basically, they're not avoiding paying taxes on the property they continue to own is the
Correct.
I think the point you're making.
Oh, right.
But the clarification is well noted, because my brain kind of was going, a little bit disconnecting. So thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt, did that answer your question adequately?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Let me see. There are no other hands raised, and I believe we're through our agenda. Before I call for a motion to adjourn, can I make the recommendation that we move to an executive session after we adjourn this meeting to discuss the agenda item that we cut short? It can be brief. Are folks okay with that?
Are you speaking of the
Transportation
negotiation? I think we should do that in a smaller setting among maybe the finance committee chairs and just because I don't think
actually I would like to ask that we just do that, and it can be a 2-minute one.
Okay.
If that's okay. Just I don't even want to talk about why I would like to do that, even in public. Just because of the fact that it's related to negotiations. So
fair enough.
But so if that is okay, I know just for administration's benefit, when we were in-person meetings, that would happen. So we might just have a brief, abrupt executive session. It then gets listed. So I believe we're allowed to just do that. But could we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, Charles Bedell Williams.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.